Hello, What Now podcast listeners. It's Julie. Want to begin by thanking you so much for listening to our podcast, and in particular, this episode and conversation that you're about to hear. All of our episodes are important, but this episode that's coming up is special. Chris Roden is someone that the three of us didn't know prior to recording this episode with him. I had been reading his blog online for the last 2 years, but didn't know how to get a hold of him. And then we found out that another friend and podcast guest, Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald, was his friend, and she agreed to virtually introduce me to Chris. So Chris and I immediately began to have some very meaningful, soulful emails back and forth, and he generously agreed to be our podcast guest. We recorded this conversation on April 4th of this year. And 21 days later, on April 25th, Chris died of glioblastoma, an aggressive cancer of the brain. So we are so honored to have had this time with him when he knew that time was so precious and running out. At the point in Chris's journey, when we had this conversation, his cancer was obviously quite advanced, and you may be able to detect that. But I really encourage you to stay with us and stay with the discussion, because you'll be gifted with little crumbs and gems of wisdom that Chris drops along the way that guides us just to a deeper understanding of him, to ourselves, and just to the greater world. For us, it was a wonderful and enlightening conversation with a man who leaned into the reality of his life, his dying, his suffering, and his joy. And he had the courage to share it with us. If you'd like to read more about Chris's journey and glean the insights and wisdom he so freely shared, you can visit his blog, which is entitled With and Wonder. I encourage you to settle in and stay with us as we move into this incredible blessing of meeting and spending time with Chris Roden. Hello, welcome back. Thanks for listening to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. And I'm here in our recording studio with my friends and colleagues,
David Kennedy and Red Keating.
And I'm Julie Brown. And we have a special guest with us today, Chris Roden. We're just so delighted you're joining us, Chris. And we're just getting to know each other. But I think even in our little bit of conversation, we're really looking forward to our time here together today. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Chris, by way of introduction to our listeners, wondering if you can just, in whatever way feels meaningful to you, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to be having this conversation with the three of us today.
The question is how far back to go. I'll say this. My introduction to cancer world, I guess it was about 7 years ago, about 2 months after my daughter got married to her her college sweetheart. She was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroendocrine cancer. And before that, cancer was just like, the only thing I could say about cancer was it was like the words you never want to have, your name and somebody you love their name in the same sentence as cancer. And like it kind of got blown away by it. Not in a terrible way. I know this sounds crazy, but I suspect some of you guys know what I'm talking about. So through her diagnosis, I got invited into infusion rooms. And once a week for a number of years, for about 2 years, we'd go into infusion rooms together and we'd sit there with the people. And it's hard for me to explain this unless you've been there. I think some of you guys have been there, so you know what I'm talking about. Like infusion rooms are the places where people are the most honest and the most serious and the most truthful. And they're delightful places, and they're not fun. I'm not saying they're fun, but they're a place where you can go in and be completely yourself and honest and real. Mm-hmm. And there's something really beautiful about that. That was my introduction into cancer world, if you will. Mm-hmm. We can fast forward a couple of years. Abby died 2 years after she was diagnosed. So she died in 2018. She died about 2 or 3 weeks short of her 20th birthday. And one of the things she made me promise to do, Abby was too smart to say, here's my list of demands for you after I die. Thank goodness she didn't do that. But she did give me a handful of things. She said, here's the first thing. Don't let this be for nothing. That's what she said to me. And of course I go, what is that supposed to mean? Give me something more than that. And she wouldn't. She goes, you'll figure that out. And I go, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then she did very specifically said she had, I don't know if you guys know First Descents or not. It's an organization out of Colorado. First Descents is an organization that does adventure therapy for young people who've been affected by cancer. And she came upon them somehow where she ended up doing a rock climbing camp for a week in the Adirondacks with this organization. And she said, the only thing I will specifically ask you is that you have to volunteer for a week to be the camp dad at First Descents for a week. And so after she died, I called up First Descents and said, I want to do this. And they said, sure, come on. I was out walking on the Appalachian Trail, and you have to wait a little while before they find a place for you. And I was up in Boston, near Boston, up in the Berkshires, on this little lake up in the Berkshires. I wish I could remember the name of it. We're walking on the AT, and I get a phone call going, can you be in Colorado next week? And I was like, of course I can. So we pack up all the stuff. We get to an airport. I get out to Colorado the next week. And it's the same thing we talked about in the infusion centers. And what I mean by that is you go into this cancer camp and there's all these people that are between 18 and 39 years old. They're all young people who've been affected by cancer. And like, it's bizarro. All of the costumes, all the makeup that we normally wear around, it's just gone immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They walk in, and my job on day one, this sounds ridiculous, but my job on day one is to pick up people at the airport. And by the time we get back to the lodge, just to make sure they have a new name. Okay. And so what does that mean? Everybody has a camp name. It's different than their regular name.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of that is, and you guys have all done groups like this before, I'm sure. Like one of the people was in my car, was kind of internet famous. She was a famous blogger. Nobody knew the whole time. I picked her up at the airport there were 3 other people that were there, and her name was Treats. I can tell you her name was Treats. That was her camp name. Because we stop at the airport and everybody's there early, and we show up at the airport and we're waiting for the last person to arrive. And we go into one of the restaurants at the airport and she buys everybody a milkshake. Mm-hmm. And so her name became Treats. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever figured out who she was, of course. And these people just don't care about anything, all the stuff that we worry about as if it matters. Like all of it gets set aside and people are just as genuine as you. I mean, it's hard to believe. Like this is my experience in cancer world. And so I was able to do that I was able to volunteer 3 times for First Descents. Until last year, I was diagnosed with cancer, with brain cancer. I was diagnosed last time. I did a whitewater kayaking trip up in Oregon about a little over 2 years ago. I guess it was 2 summers ago. And right after I got back, I had a seizure. And before you know it, now I'm in cancer world in a completely different capacity. Like all those things about what really matters, now it hits you cold in the face, right? Like all the things that you thought you knew, they just mean something different now. So I didn't get to go last year because it would have been unhealthy for me to drive a van full of cancer patients back and forth from the hospital, especially with seizures looming over my shoulder. It would have been a very bad idea. Anyway, so that's where I am now. So I feel like in some ways I have this unique perspective of having been a caregiver, and which I think is really hard for my wife because she's getting to walk this for the first time with somebody who's already walked it one time. And I think in some ways it's kind of a lonely place for her. Mm-hmm. Like discovering all these things for the first time when the person you're walking with has seen them a lot of times before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are you finding cancer to be a lonely place for you, Chris?
This is going to be one of those questions where I promise you I'm going to turn it around, okay?
Okay.
This is kind of important to say. When Abby, my daughter, got sick, I was very fortunate. I was able to take a leave of absence from my job, and I could devote myself fully to her care. And until you've done that with somebody, you hear people talk about how wonderful that is. But I don't think you can fully appreciate it until you've actually done it.
Mm.
Like, there's going to be some faith that comes in here. I'm sorry, I can't help it. But like this idea of I am the caregiver and she was a care receiver is just kind of absurd. That's ridiculous. Like this idea of like love flows one way. I am the lover and you're the beloved is ridiculous. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Like I got so much out of those 2 years, it's hard for me to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Like every day waking up with the sole purpose being, how do I love my daughter today? It was overwhelming and overfilled me at the same time. It was never just directed at Abby. It was always both ways. It has to be that way, I think. So you asked me that how, if this is lonely for me. Like in some ways, having had that experience where I was in a place where I could take a leave of absence from my job. It was unfortunate for my wife now, Catherine, who we got married after Abby died. That was on her daughter. And like she did not have that same level of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hello, come on. I'm about ready to go here. Where the job doesn't really freaking matter. Stop it. It was very lonely. I felt like I was in a place where she just couldn't be. She couldn't get there. She couldn't get there. And it's not, and sometimes it felt like it was uncaring. If I'm honest, sometimes it felt like, you think this job is more important than the last however many months we have together? And that was lonely. And what's kind of funny is that script is flipped a little bit. Like now, when I'm spending so much time, I spend a lot of time sleeping, now. We're on like months and months of steroids and months of other drugs that like affect you. And it just makes me want to sleep all the time. And Catherine, my wife, who's done a beautiful job, and she's been really amazing and graceful and thoughtful. I think it's hard for her. Like I still do some counseling, called counseling work is kind of stretching it a little bit. I do one group a week. I do a free writing group once a week. And I'll be honest with you, it's like one of the most energizing things that I can possibly do. I don't know how familiar you guys are all with free writing.
You can explain what sort of maybe you do, so that maybe some of our listeners who don't know what it is get a little update.
Sure. We have a group of 10 or so people who show up every week, and they come in completely unprepared, except they have a pad of paper and a pencil. And right at the very beginning, we had everybody just on a scrap of paper write down a word, any word, and the words have been anywhere between mustard. I'm not even joking. Mustard was one of the words, all the way to agony and fear and love. Like any word in the world, everybody wants to make it really profound. I really love. That's why I love mustard. The first day was like the very first time we met. The word was mustard, and we just pick the word out, and we go through this process of inviting everybody's filter to take a nap. Maybe we should just do this today. You guys just want to do this today?
Sure.
I won't do it.
But it's one of the most profound moments of your week.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's this. The process is this. I'm going to pretend we're doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like Red and David and Julie, you guys know exactly the person I'm talking about. You have this little voice that sits inside and filters everything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super active, works really hard, and we can be really grateful for that part. And I want you to be grateful. I want you to really embrace that part. And then I want you to invite that part to go over and take a little rest over in the corner, maybe on the bookshelf. For the next hour, we don't need that part. That part, please, before you ask it to go to sleep, thank it for all the work it's done today to keep you from saying really things that you don't really want to say. That would get you in trouble. So if you can do that when you're ready, I'm going to draw a word out of this hat, and then you're just going to write for 10 minutes without any help from your filter. Just remember this, at some point while you're writing, I'm pretty sure the filter is going to run back over and say, what are you doing? It's going to shake you a little bit. And I just should look at it with love and just say, thank you, but I got this. I can do this without you today. And then at the end of 10 minutes, the timer will go off, and then you'll each be offered the opportunity to read aloud what you've written. You don't have to read it all. You don't have to read it all. And I will say this, I recognize how scary it is, first of all, to write without a filter. And I really understand how scary it is to read out loud what you've written without a filter to a group of people you may or may not know. It takes courage to do this, and I appreciate it. Everybody in here appreciates it. That's the first two elements of it. The third element is when you listen, you don't get to listen through an assessment lens. You're just listening to see what it trips inside of you, what experiences come up when somebody else reads. And when you're invited to comment on what other people read, but let's leave words like good and bad and profound and deep and stuff like that. Let's just leave those out. Just assume that everybody's writing is good, to include yours.
What's the background of these people, Chris? Who is it? Like, what are they coming to this group with? Like their experience, their life experience?
There's nothing unifying them that way. The first time I did a group like this, it was for a group of seniors at a retirement center. I mean, it was one of the more profound things. I loved that group. And the reason why, what did they have at the independent living facility? They had bingo and they had those types of events. This turned into a group of people who really knew each other intimately because there was a lot of vulnerability there. Mm-hmm. It was kind of breathtaking how they would show up every week and they would talk about how the people in that group knew them better than anybody else. And I was doing that for hours, honestly, as I was trying to get my licensure taken care of. I was just trying to burn through hours as quickly as I can. So if anybody's listening and they're trying to figure out how to get hours working, like groups is a way to do it. If you can put together a group, it's like brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll change your life. I think doing groups will change your life.
Mm-hmm. Could I do a little thing like that? Because when you were talking earlier about your daughter and how silly it is that we have this sense that love only flows one way. And what popped up into my head and the question, but I didn't have a place to ask it, but now I've just created it, was what do you think of when you hear of the word burden or people feeling like they are a burden when they are the care receiver?
Depends on who you ask. Are you asking Chris, the caregiver, or Chris, the cancer patient?
Who wants to answer first?
The caregiver wants to answer first. And I think it's almost a laughable question. Mm-hmm. But if the patient goes, I totally get it.
Right.
I totally get it. And how do you hold both of those things in your head at the same time? I don't know. Mm-hmm. My guess is you would have expected me to answer that way. Yes?
I wasn't sure how you were going to answer because the question, the thought of the way you said it, that love, it's silly that we have this concept that love only flows one way, that you were also receiving as the caregiver as much love as you were giving, made me think of, in our work, we often hear people talk about they don't want to be a burden, right? Or that they feel they are a burden. And you are on both. You are now a person who could be living on both sides of that equation, as you said, as a caregiver and maybe a care receiver. And I just wondered if you had any insights on the concept of what, when we think of the term burden, or when people are talking about burden, what that means to you.
How do I say this? Like probably 6 months ago, I stumbled on this thing by Thomas Merton that I kind of like latched onto. And Martin talks about like the most loving thing we can do for somebody is consent to be loved. And one of the most difficult things we can do is consent to be loved. Like they're both true at the same time. And I really love that idea. I do. Mm-hmm. Like the most loving thing that Abby ever did is she accepted whatever love and she cherished whatever love I had to give her. If that was getting blue Kool-Aid from the refrigerator, and she would cherish it. Like that's part of a thing. I'm not sure how many people really get the experience of having their love and what they have to offer cherished. I think we're really good at like identifying what our love language is and trying to figure out how we're supposed to love to meet somebody's love language. Like I can give words of affirmation, no problem. I can give gifts. I can give quality time. That's different than I'm naturally wired to do something like to get blue juice from the refrigerator and bring them in and bring it into my daughter. And it makes me sad when I think about how hard we work to understand how a person wants to be loved instead of how hard we work to understand what's our natural way of loving and finding the person who's willing to cherish the way that we offer love. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like I have a crazy idea about the love languages book. I know it's not popular. I know it runs counter to what a lot of people think, but I think we've got it exactly opposite the way it should be. I think we have it backwards. You keep going?
Sure.
Like, let me ask you this. Do you have an idea of how you love people, how you wish people would accept your love?
Mm.
Can any of you answer that question?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question to think about, though.
This is really resonating with me, Chris, from my own cancer journey. That quote you gave by Merton, because it really was a very pivotal moment in my cancer journey, was saying like, please, I need you. I need these people, and I need to allow myself to kind of fall into their arms, right? And let myself be loved and carried through the journey. And to this day, it feels like one of the hardest things I have ever done. Doesn't sound hard to say it. It's very hard to do it. It's very hard to feel so exposed, so vulnerable, so fragile, to say, please don't leave me alone, and here's what I need. And then to hope that people will show up, and then hope that they will keep showing up, and to just receive it. And as you were talking, it reminded me of, post-cancer treatment, when I would hit my, have my scans, or, and I would check in with like the people that were from my inner circle. And I would, and on my birthday, I would, reach out to those people to say thank you. I'm here today, and you carried me through this. And consistently, every time, those people would say back to me, you don't understand how much I got from the process. Like, it wasn't this one-way thing. And I have heard that from all of my kind of inner circle of my people. So as you were speaking, you first started to speak, I don't know if you saw it, but my eyes welled up, because I thought, oh, I know this. I live this. Yeah. And I lived it with them.
And it's really powerful that but often it's that moment of coming to grips with our own mortality, or the mortality of people that we love deeply, that is now coming at risk to ending before we want, where we are shaken to stop and to think about life differently. And I'm just, from listening these few moments, Chris, I mean, your life was transformed in many ways as you chose to begin telling us about yourself at that cancer moment. And how is Chris Roden different today than you were 25 years ago, like before this cancer experience? What's some of the most crucial things that you hold on to as a person now that's different who you are?
I love the question. On the one hand, I love the question. On the other hand, I go, I can't think of anybody less qualified to answer that question than me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time I go into the doctor with brain cancer now, the doctor looks at me and says, any new deficits? I go, why are you asking me that?
Yeah.
You got to ask Catherine. She's the one that's living with me. I don't know.
Right.
It's like asking a drunk guy, are you okay to drive?
Right.
Yeah, of course I am.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I am. So how was I different 25 years ago? I don't know.
What are people saying about you?
I think that people say now that I'm much more willing. I'm going to tell you a funny story. It has nothing to do with any of this that we talked about. I had a good friend. His name was Todd. I'm going to say his name. a good friend. We were naval buddies together. I knew him from my time in the Navy. I knew him, and he was a dear, dear, dear friend. He was my best friend at the time, and he was kind of battling through substance use disorder. And he's the first guy that ever said to me, "Chris, I love you." Not "I love you, dude." You guys know the difference between "I love you, dude" and "I love you."
Mm-hmm.
Like the gulf between those two things is so huge. Like Todd was the first person ever said to me, "I love you." And this was probably in 2005. It was shortly before he died. And it made such an impact. And between Todd and the cancer stuff, like I'm not shy with that anymore. I'm not shy at all. Like sometimes I wonder if it's too much, and then I don't worry about it. I don't care. Like the number of times I say "I love you" to a man, and not "dude." I love you, David. I love you, Red. Like that kind of "I love you." That's a big, big, big difference. I just don't hold back on that anymore. Why would I hold back? And I also don't hold back on accepting love from people either. Because it goes back to Brad, what you were saying. It flows both ways. It has to flow both ways. Like I'm not going to deny somebody the acknowledgement of how much I cherish the love that they offer. Why would I deny them that? It feels so good to have your love accepted and cherished. Why would I deny that to somebody, especially somebody I love? I mean, I think that's different. I think what's also different, these are the things you would say are obvious, I would say. Like, I don't care so much about the things I used to care about. I used to fish a lot. I used to have a good golf game. I used to have like trophies on my wall from fishing. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff, about any of it. Those things just don't mean anything.
The impression I'm getting is that cancer has sort of swept the deck clean of all the debris and the static and the noise that we feel are important to life. But when it comes right down to it, maybe just sort of cloud us from connecting as human beings. And cancer has sort of moved those things out of your way. And what I'm hearing you really saying is what's important are the connections that you have, human to human, person to person, soul to soul, with other people. And the other stuff can just go to the sidelines.
I love that. Richard Rohr says it this way, and I think he's like brilliant.
We think so too.
You guys think so too?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I never know if it's safe to drop the name Richard Rohr or not. You just never know. Like sometimes it's just absolutely not. You guys know what I'm saying based on your response.
Yep.
That if you read him, you know that he talks about this. He goes, there are two things that bring us closer to God, and it's extreme suffering or exceptional love. And part of it is he's like doing a little joke on himself because he defines suffering as any time that we don't have control, which I think is brilliant. Like if you accept that as the definition of suffering, then of course love falls into that too, right? Love, what is love if it's not like being completely and totally out of control? If you fall in love, you have no control over anything. You're willing to do anything to get that love, to be in love. Like it's a total reckless disregard for control. And it's the same thing with cancer, right? You just realize you don't have control over anything, over nothing. So you're completely and totally out of control. And then in some ways, I know it sounds crazy to say this out loud, and I shouldn't say it out loud. I don't want to minimize or belittle anybody else's experience. But like in some ways, suffering and falling in love are the same thing.
Letting go.
Like in some ways, even I would say this, cancer and falling in love can be very closely related. Both of them are like eliminating the illusion of control that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I know that's kind of a risky thing to say to a group of cancer people. Isn't it? Isn't it kind of risky?
It's challenging for sure, right? It might be challenging to find to get your head into that space, right? Versus the space of fear, the space of trying to regain control, right? But it's a challenge doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or wrong. It just means it's challenging. It's not potentially easy, but it might be worth the struggle.
And I think, the other direction of that, and I was going to ask you about this, Chris, because I read a little bit of some of your comments around the language that people in cancer use, like, battle and war. And it seems to me that that's kind of if you don't embrace the love and look at that suffering love kind of angle, then you kind of go this other side of, this is my battle, this is my, I'm at war with this and that. Do you have some comments on that?
I don't think this is going to surprise you. That, to me, is the most unfortunate thing about cancer world to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea that is something I have to conquer. I can remember the conversations I would have when Abby was sick. People would come up to her, and I know you guys have all heard this before. I'm sure you have. And the number of people would say, "Don't worry, she's going to beat this. She's strong.
She's a fighter.
She's a fighter," and all this. And it was everything I could do not to reach across and grab them by the throat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do understand, like, I'm a math geek, okay? That's the logical equivalent of saying, if she succumbs to this, then she's weak.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's logically equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
If this, then that is the same as if not that, then not this. It's the same thing. And I would get so angry over that. And I know that people mean well, and I understand. I mean, I can give you the textbook reason why people would say things like that. Because they see themselves in this 27-year-old woman, and they want to believe that they have control over it. Like, if they just live the right lifestyle, exercise the right number of hours, or eat the right food, then it's all going to be okay. They're not going to get neuroendocrine cancer. If they can be strong enough, they're going to be okay. You want to go, if only it were that easy. If only it was just a matter of being strong enough or determined enough.
Yeah.
People, and you guys know this, people don't beat cancer by being strong or determined, or it's just not the way it works. Cancer takes what it wants. I mean, not always. There are good stories. Of course, there are good stories. And I don't want to paint this really bleak picture, because I don't think that's the way it is. I think that there are things that we can do to improve our odds. I do think that's true. And I think it would be foolhardy. But I think it's equally foolhardy to believe that we have control, that we get to control the outcome in some way. I had a beautiful conversation with my doctor yesterday, and it kind of feels important to me to say this. Like, the number of people who are praying and trying to pray in the right way. I mean, I'm grateful for prayer, but don't misunderstand. I'm very grateful for prayer. That is the way in which some people give their love, and I appreciate, I cherish it. I had a client, like, it was devastating to me. Like, he prayed, he lost his wife to cancer, and he was making all the deals with God you can imagine. If I just get this prayer right, God will spare her life. I know that he will. And then he loses his wife, and he convinces himself that it's his fault. I just didn't get the prayer right.
Mm-hmm.
I think about this. It's the dearest man you've ever met. He's such a sweet man. Yesterday, we got this news that he was here at my house, and we were sharing this moment together, and it just crushes me that people have this idea that they have control. Julie, you know this, don't you?
I was just going to say, you see me nodding vigorously to the things you're saying, because I think there's unintentional cruelty to our words when we use words like she's going to be okay, she's a fighter, or we're going to pray and God won't take, like all of these things that we say, because what you just said, like cancer will take what it's going to take, right? We don't have control over this. And I agree. And I've said this many times on this podcast. It's not that we can't do things that can that can support ourselves, right? In that, but we don't have ultimate control, or we certainly don't have as much as we would like to believe. And that's for those of us living without cancer and for those of us living with cancer.
And I know that faith piece that comes in, which is really, and interestingly enough, we did a podcast with Sheldon Solomon on terror management theory, that often we can use our religious belief in ways to shield us from the reality of death, and that we do not have control. And so we make this about, well, if I can say the right things or have the magic formula or can convince God that I'm deserving of this, then I can get that done. But that is really just, our way of shielding our own fear of our own mortality and death, or the death of somebody we love. So it's not that, and I agree with you, Chris. I think that faith has a role to play in many people's experience of how they find love and support in the journey. But when we move that needle to where we now have a way of avoiding what we fear, and that needle is dependent on God doing it because we get God to do it from whatever reasons. In my experience, I've watched people lose some of the most meaningful time of their life by their avoidance of their experience and need to have it fixed by God. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yes. I think of my friend that way. And I'm imagining him like he's offering up deals to God. Like, if you heal my wife, I will go on the road. I will make everybody know this story. It's going to be to your glory, all these things. And she died, and he was convinced he just hadn't struck the right deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to watch that in other people, isn't it? Especially people you love.
Yep.
Do we do that though? Because maybe sometimes it's easier to take on the responsibility and the feeling of whatever guilt, or I don't know, I guess guilt's the right word. I didn't do it well enough. It's easier to hold that than it is maybe to hold the grief and the pain from the loss. I don't know if that it's just running through my head as an idea. I mean, it's easier for me to feel responsible than it is for me to feel grieved, for me to feel that emptiness, the pain of loss. And it keeps me from that. It kind of shields me from feeling those feelings. It's easier to be upset with myself than it is to be alone, or to not have what I had before.
No matter how you want to say it, it feels to me it's easier to feel responsible than it is to abdicate control that we don't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's true.
And I think it keeps coming back to the control that we don't have. And yet we do everything we can to delude ourselves that we've got it. And not only do we have it, we are the masters of it.
So if I can, I want to go back to the conversation. It started up this little thread with the conversation I had with my doctor yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very encouraged by my doctor because we had this conversation, and she goes, and I know that she's a person of faith. And I go, look, doctor, you're not going to save my life. I know for sure you're not going to save my life. And she was ready to acknowledge this. She goes, 6 to 8 months would be pretty great if we get that far. 6 to 8 months, that'd be pretty great. Like, okay. I go, there's nothing you can do that can get us beyond 8 months. And we have to acknowledge that. And she said, yes, there's nothing I can do. Absolutely nothing. And I think sometimes it's important, like we throw around the word miracle like it's nothing. And that is unfortunate to me. Because I think the only way we can acknowledge a miracle is if we realize that we don't have control. And she was willing to go there. This is a doctor. This is a fully trained medical doctor, and she's a neuro-oncologist. And she's like, yeah, if you live beyond 8 months, it's not me. we can legitimately call it a miracle. We can legitimately call it it's divine intervention because I can't do anything more than this. There's no way, and I appreciate that. And sometimes I think it's the letting go of control that allows the mysterious and lets the miraculous into the conversation. As long as we hold on to that control, none of that makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense to talk about miracles. I don't know if Mary Catherine told you this. You've got a math geek on with you right now. Did she warn you?
We did not know about the math geek. No.
So one of my good friends was a physicist. And he's kind of an astrophysicist. And so we kind of talk about all these things. Like, just for a second, I want you to consider, if you will, the scope of the universe, how incredibly big the universe is, and getting bigger every second. Getting bigger. And I want you to think about where you are and the fact that we're talking to each other at all. Like, the chances that we would find ourselves in the same room or the same virtual room or whatever at all. I'm taking time out of this, that we would find ourselves in the same place at all is infinitely improbable in a universe as big as ours. Like, you're more likely to fly over the United States and drop a coin out of the window of your airplane and have it land on your childhood home than you are ever to be in the same room as another person. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in a universe as big as ours, like, the fact that we are even here together is impossible. Now add in another dimension of time, and you think about how big time is. Like, the universe space is just like beyond big. It's infinite, right? But we could be in this very same place at this very same time. And when you add the time in, nothing short of a miracle that we would exist in the same place in the same time. It's infinitely improbable, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
A mathematician can prove this to you. That two people would occupy the same space at the same time is infinitely improbable. David, go ahead. You started to say something.
No, but this just brings up this whole idea of what is a miracle, right? So we think of miracle as extending life, and that's kind of our focus, especially when we're dealing with a situation such as yours. But the reality is you're experiencing miracles every day. I mean the miracle of just getting up and embracing life, and the miracle, just as you've explained, Chris, the miracle of us all being here together is one that doesn't get acknowledged. We because we're so fixated on one miracle, which is, which probably won't happen, the extension of life in a way that we want, that we don't have control over, and yet we miss the miracles that happen so many moments of our life every day, and we rob ourselves of that embracing of miracles. Again, I think of Sheldon Solomon, the idea of looking at life with awe that leads us to humility, that leads us to gratitude and being thankful. And that's, to me, a healthy view of miracles, which acknowledges just that we get to talk to you today is awesome to me, but it's humbling as well, just as you've explained the chances of this. And so it leads me to gratitude, to be thankful. But what if we could look at life that way, instead of grasping only for the one miracle that's going to help us to live whatever longer than we may be talking.
The way that we decide is the right way to live.
Mm-hmm.
Even we want to maintain control of definitions. We want to maintain control of what's the word I'm looking for? The metrics. Like, we don't even have control of that. I love what you just said. I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to go back and listen to this. I'm going to fold this into something else.
In conversations like this, I'm always reminded of, and I think I've maybe said this before, the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza just starts doing the opposite, right? And he gives up all the things that he sort of believed about himself, and he just decides to make completely opposite decisions. And his entire world turns around for the better. right? And we're talking about maybe giving up control, which is the hardest thing for us to do, creates the path for humility and gratitude, creates the path for greater connections with our fellow people, and brings us closer as opposed to keeping us separated. I'll often get a problem on kind of what's the George Costanza response to this. And Chris, I think, and I don't know what blog it was, but I remember reading you talking about what would happen instead of if we were trying to always, destroy and fight cancer. What would happen if we learned how to live with it? If we took our time and energy to sort of shift that around from the fight and the battle to maybe we could just learn how to use our science, use our brains to learn how to live with cancer so that it doesn't destroy the host. And we don't think that way. And when I read that, I thought George Costanza jumped into my head again. Oh, there's somebody doing the flip, right? And sometimes that's where the answer's found.
No, I think what you're talking about is this idea that like we have somehow come up with this idea that something has to die when you have cancer. Something has to die. Either the cancer has to die or the host has to die. It's one or the other. And the battle goes on until something or somebody is dead. It has to be that way. And I think what you just described, like in my mind, I know this sounds nutty to me. It sounds nutty to me. It probably sounds nutty to anybody. It's like, what if I could carve out a little place in my brain for those cancer cells to hang out? And we'll make a little deal and say, you stay inside of there and I won't mess with you. I'm not going to send any more chemo at you. I'm not going to send any more radiation, no more surgery. If you promise just to hang out inside there. And then what's in it for me? No more white cell count destruction, no more platelets being destroyed, none of that. Like we can coexist. We can coexist.
I was just going to ask Chris, what does coexisting with cancer mean for you these days? One of the things you had said before we started recording was, can we talk about living a meaningful life? A life that is not just focused on longevity, but that is focused on meaning.
I think the best, I'm going to turn it back around on you again. Of course I am. But to me, I wonder if the best thing we can do to coexist with cancer is to let cancer take us where it's going to take us and not slam any doors and be willing to go where it leads. And it's going to lead to some pretty scary places. I mean, I know that it is. Like, I don't think what I'm about to say here is an uncommon story. Like, I suspect this is very common. I saw this with Abby. I saw it with me. When people first get the diagnosis, once you get over the shock, like the world changes colors. You see colors that you never saw before. You see the world through completely different eyes. And there comes a point at which you begin to embrace that and you love it. But then that vision starts to fade a little bit the longer you walk. And you start missing it a little bit. I know I do. Personally, when I first got this diagnosis for me, I was walking around all the time, and the things I would notice in the forest were things I never noticed before. Spider webs in the shape of baseballs. I'm not joking. They exist out there. If you've never seen them, there's spider webs that are shaped like this. And I've got pictures on the blog to prove it. Like things I would never have noticed. And to be honest with you, things I would never notice today because we're a year out. And I just don't pay as much attention as I used to. Mm-hmm. You've challenged me a little bit today, and I appreciate it. What does it mean for me today to coexist with cancer? I think it means something different now than it meant a year ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. I think a year ago, it was an invitation into paying attention, really paying attention. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'd say the same thing today or not. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I wish I would say the same thing, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Was there a certain used to itness? I guess I don't want to say the word comfort, but a used to itness that then sort of throws you back into life where maybe that vision of seeing those things gets a little blurred because you're living this on this other path again. The shock is gone. you sort of roll back into everyday life.
That homeostasis, going back to the way things were, that root, that we find ourselves being shocked into that, but then over time we return to the way we were comfortable with life before. I don't think you ever fully return, though.
I hope not. I hope you're right.
Well, I think your awareness of that tells me that we don't lose. There's things we don't lose. I love, and it's interesting because a couple of times when you were speaking there, Chris, I don't know why I thought of this, but I really appreciate Celtic spirituality. I'm Irish background, so that's my problem. But Celtic spirituality talks about, the soul isn't something that exists within the body. It's the body that exists within the soul. And that if we are really aware, then we are connecting to other people and to this world and the universe, not beginning with our physical piece, but we begin with our soul piece, and which is that awareness or connection on a much deeper level. And it doesn't, I'm not talking about, necessarily religious context here. I'm talking about a spirituality that defines who we are and how we fit and live and be part of this universe. So I think, what I've heard from you, to be honest, is that this cancer journey, first of all, with your daughter and now with you, has allowed you to embrace life, maybe with your soul first, and all of what that means in terms of how it feels, of how you engage, how differently that is than when we hide that piece inside of our physical body and we are, connecting people, with most of us, with masks or how we want to be perceived, versus a way of connecting that is the most authentic and honest of who we are. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what you've brought up in me as I've listened to you.
I think it makes complete sense. I think as soon as you have this opportunity and you are in a place where you know for sure that the way you love is cherished, somebody cherishes the way you love them, that's an invitation to take your soul out of your body and hand them your soul. And it changes everything. I think that's what you're describing in a way. Is when life moves from your head to your heart.
And then we live with that heart, not our head. Yeah. It's been a delight to have you today, Chris.
I'm just sort of struck by, and I think there are times in this conversation where I've felt awkward and I've watched everyone sort of try to reach for what they're actually trying to say, and how we struggle with the language because we're not used to talking about what does it mean to live a meaningful life? What does it mean to lead with this, to say I'm leading with my soul? What does it mean in life if I give up control? And how do I express my love and my sense of connection and my sense of support and oneness with people in my life? And we struggle to find the language, and I don't know if anybody else has felt it, but I felt very inadequate or somehow unable to find the right words to express what I think is rolling around inside my head. I don't say it's frustrating. It's just we don't have the language because we don't think or talk about it all that much. We spend our time looking at the things around life and the static and all the things that we've put in it, that when life becomes important, as you've said, Chris, all that stuff goes away. And we're left with trying to struggle with how to communicate and express how we truly feel on the important things in life. I don't know. Has anybody else felt the same way?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
If you ever get the chance, I'm going to make a recommendation. If you haven't already done it, you might want to read Faith, Hope, and Carnage. It's a Nick Cave book. I know you guys are familiar with Nick Cave. But Faith, Hope, and Carnage, he tells this story about the inadequacy of language. And it resonates very deeply in me. His story is he's lost two sons one of which was they're both tragic. When you lose a child, it's tragic. I can promise you it's tragic. One of which may or may not have something to do with Nick Cave himself. And he talks about the story how one time he's after his second son died, he goes to this restaurant and he goes in to pick up an order. Like he had a carryout order. And the whole point of this is like there are places where language just fails, it just breaks down, it doesn't know what to do, it's not big enough for the circumstances. There's a lot of places where this happens. And he just names it, he just says it, and he talks about how he goes into this restaurant to pick up his takeout order, and the woman gives him his order and acts like she doesn't know anything about his son, just treats him like a regular person. But as he's leaving, he hands her the food and he gives him an extra squeeze on his hand. Says, "I know what you're going through. I'm here for you, and I love you. We're connected." Like no words, no nothing, and he like fully appreciates like the inadequacy of words, and really loves the fact that she also recognizes the inadequacy of words. Like this is not a popular thing to say around a group of therapists, I know, but like I love that there are things that are beyond the reach of words. I love that. Thank God.
Yep. Well, and I think maybe that's where the language is. That's maybe where it starts. Or maybe lives is the right way.
The language of mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The soul language.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but Chris, I wanted to sort of come back to that conversation you had with your doctor, and she was sort of laying it out for you to say anything beyond 8 months would be a miracle. How do you see the next 8 months? What do you hope for the next 8 months in your life?
Now we're getting to the question, right? What's it mean to live a meaningful life?
Yeah, because it's so cavalier to say, oh, we're all going to die. But to be sitting in an office with a physician and that physician says anything past 8 months is a miracle. That's a very different message when it's directed at you. Yeah. So how will living a meaningful life manifest itself for you in the next 8 months? I mean, you can't see the future and you don't know everything that's going to happen, but what do you hope for?
This is going to tie together a bunch of things that other people have said. Like to me, you can look at life from this great big place, or you can look at it very small. And to me, I think life exists at the intersection of those two things. It's fair to say, what the heck is that supposed to mean? That's a fair question. Like, as we were talking about before, like the fact that we're even sitting in this room together, even this virtual room together, is as small as it gets and as unlikely as it gets. And like the world has become very, very small in a beautiful way. Like every person I meet, this is really meaningful to me. And I feel like if I'm venturing into something I shouldn't, you can stop me, Julie, or whoever, you can stop me. But like this idea of being image bearers is very real to me. That you, Red, are an image bearer of God. Like, how do I say this? I want to be in love with God. And if I'm in love with God, and Red, if you bear the image of God, then there's a transitivity there that's like given, which means I'm in love with you.
Mm-hmm.
And not to make this too weird, Julie, but I'd say the same thing to you. Like, if you could say, Chris, how would you live your life? What would you do? Like, in a perfect world, everybody I met, either in person or on here, so David, I'm looking directly at you, would know that they're beloved. Like they would get a taste of their belovedness from our interaction. That there would be nothing better to me than that. Like shrink all this mindful stuff down to right here and right now. Like we hang up the phone and you guys, we hang up the computer and each of you walks out of here and you go, you know what? I do believe I'm beloved. I believe it. Like if I can multiply that by everybody I meet for the next 8 months, that would be amazing. Because I think the world has the potential to change in a really beautiful, profound, big way if we do that. Like if you guys took that out, if that's what, I don't know if that's your meaning, but if that's your meaning, that becomes your meaning. Like if you took it out to everybody and they took it out to everybody, like I don't think the craziness we're dealing with right now could last another minute. I just don't think the hate could stand up to that kind of love. I really don't.
Well, let's try to take it forward.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because in the very core, you are identifying our basic identity of ourself. We usually, we can choose to identify who we are by the things that we have gathered around us, or by the accomplishments that we have done, or by what other people are going to say about us. But perhaps the greatest gift of identity is the gift of being beloved. And we are loved by people who mean that to us. But love is the great basis of identity that really stays with us.
And I can tell by all of our faces that the love has reached through time and space and technology and landed from you, Chris, on each one of us, and probably will for our listeners too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to What Now? On the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. What Now is produced in partnership with Hospice Peterborough, dedicated to providing compassionate care and support to individuals and families facing life-limiting illness and loss. What Now is recorded at Thin Spaces Studio in Peterborough, Ontario. Special thanks to Paradise Garage for providing the music. Technical support is provided by Sean Heichert, and audio engineering by Kevin Fleming. More episodes of What Now are available for free on most major podcast platforms. If you found value in our conversations, please support us by following, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends and loved ones. If you'd like to support the essential work of Hospice Peterborough, please consider visiting hospicepeterborough.org/donate. Your contribution helps us to continue to provide vital care and support. Until next time, may you find peace and comfort on your journey.